I spent a lot of time in prayer, and God was gracious to give me a great deal of support. But in the meantime, there was a lot of damage to my emotional life. I didn't realize the two were separate. That is, the emotional part and the spiritual part. What God did was essential. God helped me to go back into my emotional life and bring about healing there, which then freed me to go on further in spiritual growth. The healing I experienced in my emotional life enabled me to better recognize my unhealthy thinking patterns. I discovered 3 interconnected patterns of unhealthy thinking. I call them don't rehearse it, don't nurse it, and don't curse it. The first is don't rehearse it. Rehearsing is looking to the future. It's projecting. Let me give you an example. My husband had a bad habit of coming home late. Now, we had talks about this. We had arguments about this. He'd say, I understand. I know this bothers you. I'm not going to do that anymore. And then he'd come home late again. And he did that for years on end. So, let's say he told me what time he'd be home, and he'd be late again. And then my rehearsing would start. I'd start thinking, well, all those things I said to him the other times, that didn't really get through to him. What am I going to say this time that's really going to get to him? I would start to plan the whole conversation, except it wasn't really a conversation. I was planning a monologue. In planning a monologue, I was ruling out the real possibility for dialogue. Here's what I was doing. Looking at all the things that I might say and rehearsing them over and over in my mind. And I'd find a few of them and I'd think, oh, well, that's really clever. I'll make sure I get to say that. And then he'd come in. I had this whole thing rehearsed. I had an agenda. I wanted to be sure that I got in all of my points. So I wasn't really listening to him to hear his side anymore. I wasn't entering into a dialogue. I was looking for opportunity to speak my monologue. Now I see the negative aspect of rehearsing. Rehearsing prevents communication. Consider this. There might have been a legitimate reason why he was late that time. But when I worked myself into a frenzy by rehearsing my monologue beforehand, I wasn't going to be very open to hearing any legitimate reason. All right, the next topic is don't nurse it. Rehearsing is looking to the future. Nursing is looking to the past. Let's say that my husband and I had an argument the night before. Then when I got into work, I had paperwork spread out all over my desk, but I couldn't even see it. All I could think about was all the stuff that happened the night before. He said this, and I said that. And he said this, and I said that. And ooh, he said this, and I wish I said that. Imagine that. I would even try to change the scenario, thinking of all the stuff I could have said. That was really an effort to get into the argument better, so that next time I could have the upper hand in it. I don't want to be involved in that kind of nursing. There is a positive side, though. When I look to the future, then that's planning. If I look to the past, it's learning from my mistakes. Like, let's say with planning. Let's say my husband and I had tickets to a play. Now, I already knew he had a bad habit of coming home late. So I needed to have an alternate plan. My main plan was, he will make it home on time and we will go to the play together. My alternate plan was, I'm going to call a girlfriend and say, if my husband isn't home at such and such a time, would you like to go to this play with me? If she said yes, then I had an alternate plan. If she said no, then I'd dismiss that from the alternate plan. Or maybe my alternate plan was, okay, if you're not home at such and such a time, I'm going to leave, and I'll leave your ticket on the kitchen counter so you can join me. Whatever. I'd have an alternate plan so that I wasn't sitting there stewing and fuming and wondering, how am I going to handle this? He's late again. See what I mean? It's good to have an alternate plan. Now, with nursing, I don't want to look at the past and just mull it over and over. What I want to do is, I want to learn from it. I might look at the argument we had the night before and say to myself, well, there are certain ways that I didn't behave well, and I don't like what I said and did with this. So next time, I'm going to change my behavior so that I am more pleased with who I am as a person. So my thoughts weren't about how to get into the argument better. My thoughts were about how to handle myself better in the next argument. So the point that I want to make is I want to be active instead of passive. I want to take appropriate action when possible. I don't want to just react to inappropriate actions. All right, the third one is don't curse it. Now, my husband's drinking did cause difficulties, so I went for marriage counseling. He didn't want to go, but I went anyway. In hindsight, I can say that for me, counseling was very beneficial. I spent 3 years working things through with a Christian therapist. In the very beginning, we focused on the issues I had with my husband, but a little after we got started, he switched the main focus to dealing with the issues with my mother. Now, I hadn't even anticipated that. I went for marriage counseling. I didn't know that he was going to work on me, but it ended up being a great blessing. And after a while, we also worked on the issues in the marriage, and those things began to improve. At that time, my husband was getting worse and worse because he was still drinking, but I was getting better. Therefore, it seemed to me that things were already getting better. Near the end of those 3 years of counseling, my counselor suggested that I go to Al-Anon, which is a fellowship for family and friends for those who care about someone who has a drinking problem. When I went to Al-Anon, I discovered that they could show me healthy living patterns. I learned healthy thinking patterns, healthy attitudes. I learned that I can change myself, but I can't change other people. I had to become responsible for myself and my own life. Over time, I was able to transform much of my own behavior. Now, here's an important point. If things hadn't gotten really bad, I never would have gone for help. Because of my reaction to my mother's outbursts of anger, from childhood on, I had many areas of anxiety and insecurity. It wasn't until midlife that I reached the point that my life was so unmanageable that I had to go and get help. So I did, and I got a lot better. I'm very grateful now that things got as bad as they did. Otherwise, I would have just continued the rest of my life with minimal functional ability. So because of what's happened, I don't want to curse the past anymore. I want to develop an attitude of gratitude. Things from the past have shaped me into who I am today, and I like who I am today better than ever before. So to summarize, I want to plan for the future, but don't rehearse it. I want to learn from the past, but don't nurse it. I want to develop gratitude for the past, so don't curse it.